We're finally here. We're starting to get to the point where our website's going to start taking some shape. So in this video, I'm going to go over some information about things called wireframes and prototypes when it comes to developing our website. So we've been through all of these other planning stages, and this is when we finally get to start visualizing and laying out what the site is going to look like. We're still not coding yet. That'll be in the next step, but this is where we start to get to see really what our site will look like, start thinking about the layout and the colors, the fonts that we use, and that sort of thing. This is just a quick overview of the process that we've been going through so far. So the first thing that we did, we're really just finishing up that research stage where we looked at our audience and we determined the purpose of our site. We determined what our site, what kind of pages, what kind of content it needs, so therefore the architecture, how people need to flow through it in our funnel plan. And what this video is going to talk about is these three pieces in the middle. I'm going to briefly touch on sketching, then I'm going to spend some time on wireframes, and then the visual design, which is where our prototyping is. And then finally in assignment 4, we will be getting to the coding element. So to get started, we're going to start thinking about this visual design process of wireframing and prototyping as a form of problem solving. We need to think about how we are going to be putting all of this content that we need not only onto a page in a visually appealing way, but also in a way that's going to make sense to our audience, which we discussed in the user experience video just prior to this. So we also need to consider things like white space, because that is important. We need to make effective use of white space, but it can't just look like there's a hole so that people think that something's missing. So we need to, give our images and our text a little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room. We also have to consider we can't emphasize everything. We have to think about what is important on any given page. What is it that we really want our visitors to look at, to notice, to read, to take action on? Because if we try to emphasize everything and everything becomes bold or a heading 1 or heading 2, then nothing has emphasis, because now it's just everything has been emphasized and it loses its impact. One of the things that I'm going to talk about in more detail is the use of grids. So I'm not going to go a whole lot into that right now, but I will talk about it shortly. And then the next piece is it's a best practice on the web. And there are certain ways that most people, at least in the Western world, or any people who speak or read a language that goes from left to right. This would be completely different if you were speaking a language that reads from right to left. Thinking about most of the Western languages where we do go left to right, we have what's called an F layout and a Z layout. The F layout is it's because of the shape that it forms. And basically what happens is people move. They always are going to start in this upper left. So this is a very good place to put things like your logo or a word mark so that people know which site that they are on. And then they'll quickly scan across the top. And so this is why it's also a good place to put your navigation and your links for various things, search bar, anything else that might be really important for them to quickly understand and grasp the concept of your site. Then the next thing they do in an F layout is they scan across and then they come back to like the next line or next row of things that are highlighted or emphasized. So they'll read any sort of headline that happens to be here. Or if there's a banner image here, they'll scan across it and take a look. And they're going to keep doing this, but this is the gist. It's across, down, across. And then they're going to do that again. They're going to keep going down and across. So it becomes more than an F, but that's the general idea. So the things that are up here across the very top and this next line are the really important places to put things on your web page. The other layout is what's referred to as the Z layout. Now, the thing that you'll notice that they have in common is that they start in the upper left and scan across the top. So you can see when it comes to a best practice in developing websites that this is an incredibly crucial piece, that your logo, your subscription newsletter, if you're just going to do something with like an email to fill out a little form, important information, but most of the time you're going to see your logo and your navigation across the top. This is why it is so important. And then in the Z, they tend to just float across. A lot of times you're going to see this in the case when there's a banner, and so they'll just kind of go from the top, float across it back to the left, and then they'll start scanning across the information that's there. So in this particular case, you're going to see that there's a column of information here, a column here, and this big sign up button. So they're going to scan across, go, okay, this is who the site belongs to, this is the navigation, so this is a general idea of their content. Scan across, maybe scan the headlines that are here, and finally end up on the action. So these are some things that are important in considering whether you're going to do an F layout, where they're going to land, or a Z layout. These are based on eye tracking and other software that's able to track where and how users interact with websites. So these have become some best practices. So now we have this general idea, right? So we know the kinds of things that we need to do and the types of things that we need to avoid. Now we need to start sketching. Now this isn't a part of the assignment for assignment 3, but it still is a highly recommended way of beginning any task. And the reason is because it's quick. You can do tons of thumbnails and rearrange where things are very, very quickly by comparison to working in an application such as Photoshop or Illustrator, where you're going to have to completely rethink every move you make because if one thing's going to affect another. So you can create multiple sketches. You can play with the layout. They can be really rough, but they're going to give you an idea of where to go next. Because sketching is important, because first idea is rarely your best idea. This is why we have lots and lots of images that we can use, and then you pick what you like best and you can morph them and change them and evolve them as necessary.